Hi, my name is Shireen Qudosi. I'm a Muslim reformer and a writer on Islam in the 21st century. And today we're here with Abbas Taj. He's the director of Interfaith Unity for Tolerance, and he's the sponsor of a fantastic resource called Faith-Based Violence and Deobandi Militancy, a book that we will be talking about shortly as well. I love that you talked about how this is a new way to produce critical thought, and that's bringing people together. Can you tell me more about that?
The Faith-Based Violence and the Rise of Deobandi Militancy in Pakistan is a book that came about after years of blogging, doing thousands of blogs about rebuilding Pakistan as a moderate, progressive, secularish, liberal, democratic nation. And in that fight, we lost a lot of people. Our bloggers are still missing. Some have lost their lives. So ask this question to the leading academics in the area as to what are the root causes of this faith-based violence. And this is a different way of organizing a book. So basically ask the question, and then all these great academics helped contribute research and chapters, and that's how the book came together. So it's not a book by one person. It's a book by 4 editors of the book and about 16 academics that contributed to it. Amongst people that have reviewed it include, some of the greatest intellectuals of our time, including Noam Chomsky, including Ian Talbot, and many others. So this is a good way to address a very big fundamental problem. Not one person should address it. It should be a group of people, leading intellectuals, leading thinkers, leading academics, and that's the whole idea of the book.
I love that your work really focuses on what's going on today. And today we're looking at how there's so much going on, especially with the new presidency and a new administration. In the first week in office, Trump has already signed an order potentially banning 7 countries and their immigrants and refugees from coming to the States. On top of that, we have extreme vetting from Afghanistan and Pakistan. How do you feel about that? How does that play into security needs?
So first of all, I'd just like to say, you're from Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I'm from Pakistan. And that, our friends, our family, our mothers, our daughters, our brothers and sisters are traveling back and forth, and they're going to be given a rough time. And they're patriotic Americans. We love this country, and we don't need anybody to, kind of give us a validation for that. And it makes them feel small. It makes them feel marginalized. This is not a good thing. Having said that, I'd like to say that the problem is real, and it has to be addressed in a more intelligent way, in a nuanced way, not through a hammer, but through a chisel. And there's a way to do that. And we have to focus on that. I'd like to, quote Elon Musk, who's a great visionary, a great leader of our time. And he says we don't agree with Trump on a lot of these things, but we have to engage with Trump. And we have to, together form that chisel that solves the problem. So clearly, this is not the solution. Yet, and similarly, the wall is not. So, it's the same thing. Using a sledgehammer to solve a problem where you need to institute certain measured responses in place.
For the larger American population and the world, the concern has been about refugees. So when we talk about extreme vetting and we talk about the immigration crisis, there are 2 aspects of it. One is political, and you talk about how we really should look at Saudi ties into extreme vetting and immigration issues. But there's also the issue of refugees and humanitarian rights. So for Americans, and especially those who are Trump supporters, the issue has been, as well as Muslims as well, the issue has been, do we allow refugees in, and with that we increase our security risks, or do we preface the entire refugee argument with a humanitarian emphasis? How do we balance those 2? Do we balance those 2, and can we balance?
We have to balance humanitarian issues with security needs. Both are very real. America is all about bring me your tired, bring me your hungry. America is a great country, has a great history of philanthropy. It has a great history of the capacity to turn somebody who is completely destitute into a resounding success. I myself am an example of that. I came here with nothing, and this country gave me everything. And we cannot go away from that. It would be un American. So we have to embrace these people that are victims of sometimes our own bad policies. So we have to deal with the refugee issue. At the same time, we have to deal with the security issue. And both issues can be dealt with without using, like I mentioned earlier, a sledgehammer approach. There is a way to do that, and we should do that.
Right. And I love that. I love that we talk about refugees in a humanitarian context, because I was a refugee from Afghanistan, Pakistan to Germany. So I understand the sort of dynamics that comes in and the need that comes in, and who I am today as a reformer is a result of my experiences across the world in Asia, in South Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe, and then in America. So results of all of that led me to be who I am. So I question, why can we not take those refugees and create more progressive-minded Muslims? But for Americans, it still comes back to security issues. And so when we look at refugees, when we worry about ISIS infiltrating through refugees, the underlying problem for me, and for what I see when I talk to people and when I observe the scene, is the question of radical Islam. So if a ban on refugees and on immigration is about radical Islam, the question maybe we should be asking is, what is radical Islam? How can we better define it? And what would be your reaction to that?
Because if you're going to use a chisel approach, like you said, we cannot have these knee-jerk reactions. We have to understand the problem, and the problem, the actions actually are very disappointing. For example, we've put a travel ban on Iranians. So already we don't have diplomatic relations with Iran. We had some small ties developing, and that's not going to help us. What it's going to do is Iranian businessmen and people will not travel here. Iranians have already put a counter ban. So American businessmen and, Boeing was just about to sell hundreds of planes to Iran. So that business is going to go away. Why are we doing this? This is almost like, we're beating ourselves up, shooting ourselves in the foot. Whereas none of the hijackers that flew those planes into the World Trade Towers were Iranian. They were all Saudi, or most of them were Saudi, or from other GCC places. So why is there no travel bans there? Why is there no extreme vetting there, where most of this terrorism is coming from? So this type of knee-jerk reaction is, uncalled for. It is going to create massive discontent globally and here, and it's going to isolate America. It's going to take business away from America. And if Trump is the businessman he claims he is, he should see this.
How does that idea play into the American landscape, the American Muslim landscape? So if our issue is the Deobandi school of thought and their extremism, how does that come back to groups like CARE, groups like ISNA, the American Muslim Islamists?
Okay, what is takfir? Well, that's a very, very good point. And for the past many, many years, we have been talking about takfir. And in our blogs, in our publications, whatever little we can do on social media. And it's a very important concept that everybody should understand. If Angela Merkel, Donald Trump, all these guys are thinking that, this terrorism or these takfiri groups that are causing so much havoc that they're becoming the number one problem, then it's okay for America and the West to learn a word or two. And one word is takfiri and the other one is Deobandi and Salafi. Almost all research, including our book, shows that all the groups, all the terrorism comes from these two cults or subsects of the subsect. And what have we done? What people who claim to represent us, such as CARE, they have done what I call Diet Pepsi activism. They have gone after and defended the clock boy, and this kid who was running around a school with a pencil box and a concealed watch mechanism, sort of giving the impression that there may be a bomb or something. The teachers have a right to ask him. And what the corporate Democrats' reaction is, basically we love this kid. We're going to give him a scholarship. We're going to give him a few iPods and iPads, and Microsoft is giving him something. Well, I mean, if the teachers want to be firm and ask the kid what's in the pencil box, they have a right to ask that, and they should be allowed to ask that. And I just want to share one example from my own personal experience. The IRA in the 80s were uh, conducting a lot of terrorism in Europe. And I went to a British school, and the British ambassador to The Hague, was in fact blown up by the IRA very recently. And some kids in our school used to call in a bomb threat every time there was a chemistry class. So they didn't like chemistry, they would just prank call and say, hey, there's a bomb in the school, we are the IRA. So the teachers had a right to be firm with the students and investigate and find out what's really going on. And I think we should allow our teachers to handle these things at a community level and not make it what I call diet Pepsi activism. If there's a hijabi girl on the plane and wasn't served the Diet Coke, that's not the emphasis of the activism that the Muslims should do. And what they have done, what CARE has done by doing this kind of activism, is a huge disservice to the Muslim community. What they've been representing and protecting is the Takfiri, Wahhabi, Deobandi Salafis, the Al Qaeda or the ISIS brand or the Boko Haram brand, and they've done a disservice to the rest of us. The Sunnis, the Shias, the Ahmadis, all the other diverse group of Muslims, which they're not speaking for. They have exhausted the Muslim capital, the Muslim political capital. And that's why Trump is signing these bills. If they had dealt with this the way they should have dealt with this 8 years ago, instead of apologizing for ISIS, we wouldn't have these bills signed. So if somebody's getting stuck in Afghanistan or Pakistan or wherever because of this new extreme vetting executive order by Donald Trump, then they have CARE to thank for it.
How do we deal with the argument that CARE says that they are representative of what it means to really be Muslim American, that they are the moderates, and that they are sort of the voice of American Muslims? So how do we deal with that in the context of what is moderate and what is radical?
Big evidence of what this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality that CARE has, that outside they're looking all very moderate, and then inside their biases sometimes surface. So recently the executive director of CARE tweeted out a statement in which they showed their happiness jubilance on 84 Russian civilians that died in a plane crash. And the statement was, I wish it had been 180 because that plane had a capacity of 180. So this is where you see the moral bankruptcy. They want to kill everyone. That is not agreeing with them. Everyone that doesn't agree with them should be killed. This is the Takfiri mentality. You see it in their own discourse.
How do we deal with radical Islam? Is there a solution? Is there a military solution, a media solution, a civil solution, an engagement solution, a reformer solution? So when we look at radical Islam, the premise so far has been that we deal with it through engagement. And now we're dealing with it through either really alienating people or going to war or sort of clamping down. And to me, it seems like those are still both two extremes, and there has to be sort of a middle way, a third path. So in your view, how would we deal with radical Islam?
Well, I like to, when we're talking about Nazism and when we're talking about political Islam and when we're talking about Islamic supremacism, all like these terms jumbled up. So we need to simplify them and really focus on what the problem is. One thing I will say, it's not small problem. It is nearly as big a problem, or maybe even a bigger problem than Nazism. So we need to really focus on this, and we need to simplify. We need to simplify this and look at what the problem is. And we know that these ideas of ostracization, dehumanization, which which we define as takfirism, are being funded through the madrasas and the terror factories in Pakistan. And yes, great powers have used them in the past, including our own power, which is the United States. And we have to stop that. We have to stop the Saudis and the Qataris and the Jordanians running our foreign policy. We have lost huge ground, both morally and economically and politically, because we've tied our camels to the Saudis. So we need to take a fresh look at this. If we look at Islamic supremacism, there is evidence of, for example, on the Sunni side, we have the Ahmadiyya that have a very well developed caliphate. They have a supremacist system. They have a caliphate, but we don't have any problems with them. They don't advocate, dehumanization, takfirism, and murder. They don't. So we don't have any problem. They can have their caliphate, no problems. Similarly, on the Shia side, we have the Shia Ismailis. They have a well-developed imamate system. Their imam tells the flock what to do, and they do it. But they're not out. There's no evidence to suggest that they're out dehumanizing, doing takfir, or engaging in any form of oppression on either their community or the community outside. So we don't have any problem with that kind of supremacy. Where we have a problem is the extremist, takfirist Deobandis and Salafis who actually advocate killing people who don't agree with you. So it's very simple. It's not about supremacism. It's not about one word or another. It's about what these cults are actually doing. We have the evidence.
I want to bring the concept of takfir back to the States. So we covered how it's covered in the faith overall and around the world, but we see a special kind of takfir going on in the States, and that is by Brotherhood organizations, Islamist organizations, Salafi, Deobandi organizations, and those leaders against moderate Muslims, quote unquote, progressives, reformers, people who are essentially, let's push past the label, they're free thinkers, and that's what we fundamentally believe in. So we see a takfir against free thinkers in Islam. The associations are, well, you're funded by an Islamophobic organization. You are too radical in your beliefs towards, free speech. Can you tell me more about takfir, how it's practiced in the United States by Islamist organizations against free-thinking Muslims?
Well, I mean, we hear these terms, moderate Islam and radical Islam, used in the media. These old narratives have no room. They are completely spent forces. They are meaningless. We have to focus on the problem. And the problem, we have the data, we have the evidence, it's very clear. We have to get away from these false binaries. This is a false binary, moderate Islam versus radical Islam. I've just told you, I mean, I could paint you as a radical, I could paint you as a moderate. You could be moderate here, radical there. It makes no sense. We have to focus on these cult-like organizations who are being defended by so-called Muslim organizations like CARE and DICNA, and I don't know, there's a new organization born every day. But you have to look at what they are saying. Who is benefiting from their activism, which I call Diet Pepsi activism? Who's really benefiting? Not America, not the American people.
Yeah. Is there a difference between fundamentalism, extremism, and radicalism?
Well, we have to go by what the problem is. And the problem is takfirism, ostracization, and a lot of times how these issues are being, confused and conflated and obfuscated is by using this false victimhood mentality of Islamophobia. So if I or anyone else says, oh, that clock boy shouldn't have been doing this, or, so what if she didn't get the Diet Pepsi if she was wearing hijab? I mean, maybe she'll get a Diet Pepsi on the next flight, so it's okay. But immediately we are accused of being Islamophobes. And this whole idea we're going to sue the entire school system, everybody's Islamophobe, and using those narratives to exhaust our political capital is very damaging to the Muslim community. The organizations like CARE, and CARE is probably the leader in this, have completely destroyed any political capital that Muslims in the United States had developed over a century of living here. We have given our flag to our enemy. They're protecting Al Qaeda. They're using these false Islamophobia narratives to destroy our political. The biggest evidence for this, if they had been doing their job and protecting America from these cults within Muslims that are out to destroy all of us, then Trump wouldn't have to sign this into law. The very fact that Trump has signed this executive order is evidence that CARE did not do the job for Muslims and Americans and for this community. They did the job for Al Qaeda and those cults that form the 30-odd organizations like ISIS, Al Qaeda. And that's why this Trump has to take this drastic action.
How do we deal with radical Islam? Is there a solution that's a multi-pronged solution?
Well, it has to be a multifaceted solution. We have to engage with all Muslim countries. I'm not saying we go and now become best friends with Iran. No, but we become friends with Iran. As good a friend as we are with Saudi Arabia. We have lost so much ground by giving Putin a toehold in Syria. We have completely lost our entire foreign policy is a complete disaster. We just dictated by the Saudis and the Qataris and the Jordanians. And these are all maniacal, Machiavellian kings. They're our allies. We can do better than that. We should engage with every country. We should sell aircraft to every country. We should do business arrangements with every country. We should have cultural ties. So that's one part of it. The second part is we have to get rid of, in fact, throw out these old narratives which have gotten us to the point that the President of the United States has to sign executive orders to take extreme actions like this. This shouldn't have happened in the first place. So we have to completely expose the flag bearers of this, which is the CAREs of the world. They have completely led us down the wrong path, and we have to understand, all we have to look at their own narratives and their own, what they have been saying in the past, their own moral bankruptcy, their own biases, and we have to come together as Americans, as citizens of the world, and see this as a common problem that is almost like a cultish problem, almost like, we had the KKK here in the United States. We dealt with it as a community, as a global citizenry. We have to come together and address these problems. We have to sit down at the UN. We have to sit down with major world governments and say, well, this is the problem. Now let us have a multifaceted approach. If we have madrasas in Karachi that teach this, it impacts us here, because the San Bernardino killers came from the madrasa in Islamabad, but the OSU killer, the Somali guy, came from the Banuri madrasa, Deobandi madrasa in Karachi. So we have to address that. Those madrasas shouldn't be there teaching people to kill other people. They shouldn't be there. They're openly saying and recruiting, and the Saudis continue to fund this. So we have to stop that. That's another aspect. Yes, we need to monitor our borders. There are systems in place that can be improved. The current systems can be used. There is not a magical 20-question test that will tell us if this guy is coming from Al Qaeda or ISIS. But there are people, smart people, that can sit down with them, question them, and figure out pretty good if this is a bad person. And that person then can be surveilled a little bit. We don't have to survey grannies. We can be smart about this. So there's multifaceted things we can do.
How can the new administration, how can President Trump deal with these issues once and for all so that it's not being repeated for another administration and for the next few generations? How can we finally put the nail in the coffin on radical Islam?
The 5 things that I would advise, I don't know if I'll get to 5, but let's start. The very first thing is get rid of these, spent narratives, the radical this and moderate that. And, these things don't mean anything. They're wishy-washy and unspecific. So get specific. Where the problem is, we've talked about it. It's the Takfiri, Deobandi and Salafi mentality, Takfiri, Deobandi and Salafi cults. They are part and parcel of people like Ixna, Care. They run that. That's their mindset. Let's get rid of that. Number two, have a multifaceted approach. There's not one magical answer. This problem has been brewing for the past 200 years, and no more than 200 years, by the way. Before that, there was no problem like this within Muslims. So, what brought it on? British imperialism. They created these schools. So, we have to focus that. We talk to our cousins across the pond and say, you guys stop this. Let's fix this problem. So, we have to have engagement with every country on an equal level. If we don't have, our policy should not be driven by the checkbooks of the Saudi petrodollars against our interests. We can't have the Saudis donate to ISIS or Deobandi madrasas that produce ISIS, and at the same time be donating to political campaigns here. I don't want to name any names. I know people will be hurt. Probably be the most all of them. So if Trump is this new businessman and he's not taking donations, then he should address this. So this would be my number one thing. I mean, the people before him were perhaps, on the take, so to speak. So if he's not, then address it. Why is he taking dictation from the South? Why is he not putting bans on Saudis and not, putting bans on Iran? Either ban all of them or not selectively ban, and especially not ban those that were the people that drove those planes into the World Trade Center. 17 of the 19 hijackers were in fact Saudis. So those are some of the things that I would mention. But the most important thing I would say is, Mr. Trump, you're a businessman. Let's do business. And business is not done wishy-washy. We have to get specific. We have to have a plan. And we have to be very concrete. We can't use words like moderate and radical and get away with it anymore.